In this video, Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about how the different events in your life make you feel.
The way the hypothalamus works, it's quite cool, is that on the one hand it pops up all these little maps that you can occupy that have their core in, we'll say, biological necessity, so roughly Freud's id. But when those things all shut down because they're satiated, that's a technical term, by the way, satiated, it means satisfied. And it's a form of reward, you know. So it's sort of how you feel after you've eaten a good meal and you're in a warm room and your friends are around you, and you know, maybe you go to sleep if it's your family, you know, because I'm thinking about Thanksgiving or something like that. It's just everything is taken care of, and so you fall asleep. That's satiation. You can see that in animals all the time because they spend a lot of time satiated. Dogs, they sleep a lot. Cats, they sleep a lot because, you know, they've already attacked their cat food, and so that's pretty much it for the day. So human beings, you know, we tend not so much to enter into states of satiation. So there you're going somewhere, and there's this little straight line that'll take you there. It's a nice, efficient way to get there. Now, why do you want to do it efficiently? Well, because you use up the least amount of resources doing that, so then you can maintain some resources for doing the next thing that you need to do. So you care about efficiency and simplicity. So you want to go like the crow flies to your destination. And so then what happens along the way? Well, let's say you just get to go straight. Well, basically what happens is that you're motivated by your perception of the goal, or intermediary goals, because the goals can be linked together. And then, as long as things are going according to plan, you know, as you move towards the goal in an untrammeled way, you're going to feel mild positive emotion. And the reason for that is that you're turning the environment. The environment almost never has, most of it's irrelevant. The rest of it has a positive or negative valence. And if things are going according to plan, it has a mild positive valence, right? You think things are okay. And really what you're doing is you're observing two things. You're observing that the things that should be happening, if you know what you're doing while you're acting, are happening. And so each step forward is an indication that you're getting closer to your goal. That's incentive reward. That's incentive reward. And that's the sort of reward that you actually think of as fun. An incentive reward is produced by activation of the exploratory system that's in the hypothalamus. It has its roots in the hypothalamus, and that's the dopaminergic system. And that's the system that cocaine and amphetamines and all those other drugs that people really like to take hyperactivates, making them feel like they're doing something important and useful, even though, in all likelihood, they're not. So the dopaminergic drugs, in some sense, hijack your incentive reward systems. And it's incentive reward because you're incentivized to continue moving forward. Anything that you look at that makes you want to touch it or move forward to it basically activates the dopaminergic system. So now, so you say, well, what happens when you're on your way to somewhere? Well, roughly what happens is neutral things, which is okay, you can ignore them. Positive things or negative things. Positive things happen when things are going according to plan, or even better than according to plan. You know, you're walking to school, it's raining, somebody you know stops and offers you a lift. It's like, well, you're doing okay getting to school, and that was fine, but all of a sudden you're getting there a little faster and you're not getting wet, so that cheers you up. It's an indication that you're able to save resources while you're moving towards a goal, dopaminergically mediated. You know, and then we could imagine a different scenario where you're walking to school in the rain and somebody drives by you, maybe it's even the same friend, and they don't see you and there's a puddle right beside you, and not only do they not stop, but they completely cover you with oily and frigid water, and so, you know, that's not so good. You're angry about that and upset. Why? Well, your day is, you might say, my day is ruined. What does that mean exactly? Well, it means that you had a little map on top of your day, and you were hoping that the day and the map would correspond, and then all of a sudden the map burned up, and God only knows what's going to happen to the day. And so it's like the bottom has dropped out of your map. And so, and then you have to worry about your clothes and catching cold and all those things, and turning around and going home, and what it'll mean if you miss class, and so on and so forth. So basically that's the domain of chaos that we talked about. And so that's a negative thing, but it's also, the thing about negative things is they're sort of hard to disentangle from unexpected things. You know, because most of the things that happen to you that are negative are also unexpected because you don't go around trying to make negative things happen. So, well, what happens when something negative happens? Well, you get a negative emotion. Pain, anxiety, disgust. Those seem to be the big three. And they're mediated by different systems. We don't understand the disgust system very well. It doesn't load with neuroticism, which is quite weird because all the other negative emotions load on trait neuroticism. Pain seems to be what you experience if your receptive surfaces are, you know, if your physiological self is subject to stimulation of an intensity that's sufficient either to damage it or to damage the receptors. So, you know, but pain is complicated. It's not just physical pain, you know, from physical damage. It depends on how you define physical damage. If someone dies, that's pain. If you're alone and isolated, that's pain. If you're depressed, that's pain. If you're frustrated or disappointed, that's pain. Frustrated might mean something gets in the way of you moving towards a goal, and disappointment might mean the whole damn structure just collapsed on you. Either way, that's pain. Now that's, you know, the behaviorists would have called that an unconditioned, like a painful stimulus, they would have called that an unconditioned stimulus. You don't have to learn for that to be bad. It's sort of built-in bad. Then they would think about anxiety in response to the unexpected as learned. So the behaviorists would think that you need to learn what predicts something painful. And if you learn that something predicts something painful, then you get anxious to it or afraid of it. So, but it turns out that it's more complicated than that. So that, you know, what the behaviorists would think is that pain, in some sense, is the fundamental negative emotion. And then, you know, maybe you're a kid and you stand up underneath a table and you whack your head on it when you're learning to walk. And then when you go under the table, now you get anxious because you've learned that if you stand up under the table, you bang your head and that hurts. And so anxiety under those circumstances is a learned behavior. It's a conditioned response. Got it? Okay, but it's more complicated than that because anxiety can also be an unlearned response. So if you just encounter something you've never seen before, it's going to make you anxious. And there's actually a circuit that mediates anxiety. So it's not just a secondary derivation of the pain circuitry, it's its own little unit. And it's sort of like you figured out over time, over evolutionary time, not to get hurt because, you know, you don't want to be damaged, but then you've learned how to detect the probability that you will get hurt for so long that you've also evolved a system just to respond to that. And so some of that responds to things that you have learned are dangerous. Some of it responds to things that are generally just dangerous. Blood, spiders, insects of various sorts, facial expressions that indicate fear or disgust or anger, broken limbs, bodies, especially mutilated ones. You know, you can think, you know what's in horror movies? That's all sort of primary fear stimuli, right? And it's built right into you. Now, psychologists debate about whether it's built in or whether you can just learn it really easily. But I would say there's sort of a continuum. Some of it seems pretty damn built in. Snake fear, for example. Chimps who've never seen snakes, you bring one into their cage, if it's a rubber snake, poof, they hit the roof.